Hey, welcome to 23 Degrees Sideways. It has been a few days. We had a pretty busy weekend. One thing was I had a birthday, so that was, part of what was going on. Another thing is I had some extensive trips to make. We had to drive to a freight terminal to drop off an engine. We had to drive to an actual city pretty far away, a couple hours away, to look for some lumber. Just like a lot of stuff going on, and not all of it was on a boat. A lot of it was not on a boat. On the other hand, we also did a trip to Solomon Island in Maryland. Everything has been going, pretty well. Right now, you are staring at a pile of dirty rope line in the back of the cockpit of the Catalina. The blue one is detached because I didn't want it hanging off the ladder anymore, and it's getting moved today because I've got to drill holes in the boom and move the whole main sheet traveler up over the cabin top. That's a project. And then the other one's dockline, and it's just, we've been adjusting it a lot lately because there's been some pretty weird little tidal influences from the rivers. So, it is just how it appears to be. A messy old boat. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. I've been talking a lot about live aboard at a marina and how that works and the extensive time you spend at a marina. And, I'm still there. If you want a boat that doesn't move and you want to live on the water and you want to have lifestyle, go for it. And if what you do for sailing is a 16-foot dinghy or a 12-foot dinghy or an 8-foot dinghy, that's totally fine. If you have a little 13-foot outboard powered skiff and that's what you do for boating, that's totally fine too. You can still live on something else. A lot of the boats in the background right now, 3, 4, 5, I don't know, there's probably 9 in your frame, and more than half of them have never moved. At least since I've seen them, and in a couple of cases I've been told for years. There's one way in the back there that actually used to be a ferry or a lunch boat, drinking boat, whatever. One of the little shore cruise things, coastal cruise things. I think it was down in Norfolk, and it was a lawyer's office, and now it just sort of floats out there at the end of the dock. I'd live aboard that thing in a heartbeat. I would live aboard and rent out a couple of rooms if we were in a city area, and it would never move, because it's $50,000 and a 100-ton captain's license to get that thing off the docks. Who cares? It's a boat. Live on it. But we got to talk about cruising and minimalism and what you need, and minimalism as a not sour grapes, but as a make the most of what you got kind of thing. We are currently in a Catalina 27. It's a 1974, sold as a 1975 model year, but it has the hull number, serial number of a 74 model, and it does not have a mandated hull identification number like you would have in 75. So this is an old boat. This is a literally 50-year-old boat. Great shape. Wonderful. Everything's good. We've got an outboard for power. It did come with an outboard well, so the outboard, theoretically, the original outboard would have fit in the well and not on a cantilever mount and everything, but engine heads have gotten bigger because they're 4-cylinder, and people's idea of power requirements have changed, so a little 2-stroke 6-horsepower Seahorse is not what you're going to be cruising the ICW with on this boat. So we have a cantilever mount, 10 horsepower, 9.8, 10 horsepower engine in the back. It changes the balance a little bit because it is a heavier engine and it is a solid 18 inches further back on the boat. And that's at the end of a lever arm, so, it makes a difference. We've got a little bimini top. It's a little cheapo bimini top, but it'll do for right now. And we have a tiller. That's about it. We have a good set of sails. And all new running rigging because West Marine had a sale. And the inside is pretty bare, you know? We don't have any running water. We don't have any plumbed water. We do have a porta potty, and I've lived with porta potties before, and I think in cruising terms, they are fantastic and wonderful. There's no problems with them. They're not as easy to dispose of as what people call a composting, or actually a dry head. And composting is kind of a fake out. You know, it makes the regulators happy, it makes the city councils happy, but you're not actually composting anything on a boat that, you know, I have composted manure, human, goat, horse, pig, all sorts of manure on farms before, and it is a process, and it takes a while. So there are no composting toilets on boats. There are dry heads, and what that is you poop in a bucket, however fancy the bucket is, and you put stuff, sawdust, coir, which is coconut husk stuff, animal bedding, whatever, to absorb the liquid. It absorbs enough of the liquid that everything is kind of dry enough that there's no bacterial action and it doesn't stink, okay? If you dry out your poop, it actually doesn't stink. Pretty much what's going on. It's not composting, it's not biologically changing, there's no digestion into stuff, and you're going to throw it away. It's going to go to a landfill. That's how this works. It's just how it works. You know, we don't have a way of handling human waste that isn't going to end up in a landfill or a sewer system. If you use a wet camp head, and that's what we have right now, the kind that, you know, the camp toilet where you have a little flusher, 2-gallon flusher, and you put chemicals in it, camphor or whatever. Same thing, except you're going to dump it into a sewage line, and that's fine. You know, same thing. No one's composting it. Dry heads are a little easier to empty out. No liquid spillage. That's it. Now, of course, you have to handle your urine, and we're gonna not talk about that on YouTube because everyone knows what you actually do and everyone knows what you're supposed to do. What you're supposed to do is magically make it not exist. Or dump it in a sewer as a liquid. Anyway, so, you know, we've got this thing, and we've got this very minimalist cruising idea that we can move with from here. And now for us, this is kind of almost exactly what I was talking about. We have a project boat that is a more extensive cruising hull, cruising build. It's a tartan, 34 feet, got a lot more going on. Much heavier boat, much more stable boat, much bigger boat in a lot of ways for sailing. Or for motoring. It's just more stable and fun in a seaway when you're on a bigger, heavier boat. It doesn't rock as much. That's fine. And that's great, but it's not moving this fall. It has enough projects going on before I want to take it out that I'm kind of not ready, you know? If I finished all of the engine mechanicals, the fuel mechanicals and everything, we could go. And we could do all of the work at anchor, you know? And that's not all of it. That's the problem. You do as much as you can at anchor because anchoring is free. You know, you don't have to pay for your spot. But in this case, we're going to live aboard Marina Slip, and it just doesn't matter. If we go cruising, we don't have to pay the live aboard fee, so the price goes down. And it's cheap enough to just leave it in the slip. There's no problems with it. And we have the Catalina 27, which we got for basically free, and it runs. The engine runs. And the engine is, in cruising terms, the engine is a fungible, field replaceable unit. It's just an outboard, guys. You know, it does have some fancy bits to it. It's got an alternator, it's got an electric starter, and I can hook all that up. I use it as a pull start right now. And, you know, I can hook all that up, but if that engine dies, I'd go get another one of these 17 million Tohatsu, Nissan, Mercury 9.8 four-strokes that are all the same engine. And, you know, I take my accessories off of this one and sell it as scrap. that's it. It makes it very easy to do cruising and handle an engine breakdown. You know, my fuel system is completely the simplest thing on the world because I have an outboard well that's vented. I don't need a blower. There's no below decks gas. There's no on deck gas. There's just that well in the back, and it's open to the sea. So there's no venting. Plastic tanks. You know, I've got 2 tanks with 2 separate fuel lines, and so if something goes completely batshit buggy with one of them, I just switch it over. It's my spare tank anyway. That's how you cruise. You know, you use one tank, then you use the other tank. I just happen to have the extra fuel line instead of trying to plumb in some complicated, prone to breakage switch system. You know, refill the tanks with a Type 2, I think, Type 2 fancy gas can. We have a fancy gas can that has a bottom spout and is regulated and everything, so there's no spillage. That's all there is to it. We have no plumbing, though. That's pretty much, that and the electricity are pretty much the only things that you have to deal with a bottom-of-the-line cruising liveaboard. Here's what you need. You need to sleep, you need to eat, you need to drink, you need to poop. So sleeping is easy. You buy whatever cushions, padding, stuff that you need to sleep comfortably. This is a Catalina 27. It is an older model. You know, the boat's a 27-footer with a modern design is going to have an actual aft cabin now, like if it's a Hunter or something. It'll be a crawl space cabin like you're in a camper, a cab over camper, but it's going to be an actual like space with an actual modern mattress and stuff. You don't have that in a Catalina 27 from the 70s. You have a V-berth that is a little bit on the short side, but reasonable. You know, we've lived in a van, and there's nothing wrong with the size of the V-berth. The cushioning of the V-berth leaves something to be desired right now, so we're fixing that. We're just going to add an extra mattress on top. We're going to get a cheapy 6-inch foam mattress, not super cheap because I like a little bit of firmness, and we're going to run it. And, you know, it's not going to last forever. I'm not going to try to get a chemically treated anti-mold mattress that's going to last me for 10 years because that's going to cost $3,000 and it's not actually going to last 10 years. So, you know, you kind of have to figure lifespans on this stuff. You don't, you know, because there's mold and there's mildew and there's stuff, there's dirt, you're living in a boat, you're basically camping. So maybe being cheap enough to be willing to throw it away after 18 months is a better idea. Or 2 years. You know, keep track of it. Keep an eye on it. That's your sleeping. Pooping. We covered that. You know, dry heads, wet heads, whatever. You know, we have the camp potty right now. I will set up a composting, quote unquote, composting head soon, because I think it's easier to dispose of, and that's just fine. Now, if you're 3 miles offshore, you can dump your waste. This is not an offshore boat, and we're not going offshore. If you are dealing with a bigger budget and you want to, or you just want to spend the money on it, even because it would work on this boat just fine, you can do I think Raritan makes them, but you can do a sterilizing head, and that gives you an electric system that actually sterilizes your waste so that you can dump it overboard, even in regular coastal waters. And that's fine, except some states and some places still won't allow it. For example, Virginia's mostly river systems, and they don't allow it at all, no matter what. You can sterilize it and process it and turn it into actual flower seeds, and they still won't let you dump it. So it depends on where you are. All right, eating. You know, the biggest thing for me for eating is to keep it simple. If you require a complicated, huge menu with a whole bunch of stuff, then you set that up, and that's fine. I need one inside burner for when the weather is so bad that I can't heat something up outside. And I need a grill. we're going to run with 2 grills. The reason we're going to run with 2 grills is because sometimes you run out of propane and everyone has charcoal. There's no real big deal about that. You can run a charcoal grill off of wood. You can even run it off of green wood if you really need to. You just have to know how. And it doesn't add a lot of windage or a lot of weight. And I just happen to have, because people throw them away at this point, a cheap Magma charcoal grill that I can use as a backup. And then I have a Dickinson propane grill, and that's it. For the most part, I will do previous experience is my guide on boats. I did over 95% of my cooking on a propane grill in the cockpit of a boat. That's my previous experience, and that's just how it's gonna go. It's a little rough if it's raining really hard and you don't have an umbrella over it because the wind is blowing, and that's your 5%. That's when you have to go inside and cook. But other than that, if it's just raining and there's no wind, put an umbrella over your grill. Whatever. You'll figure it out. Very simple. Food storage is easy now because the fridges, the little 12 volt, 24 volt fridges, don't run heavy on power, and you can just run them. They're cheap, they're portable, it's a couple $100. You can put it on a couch, you can put it on a shelf, you can put it in the quarter berth, and they run. You're gonna be fine. How much food can you carry in one of them depends on what you eat, what your diet is like. A lot of people on boats live off of canned food, and I'm not going to talk about that too much. Different video topic. I will happily run my little fridge and a cooler and carry around a bunch of frozen ground beef before I decide I'm going to live off of canned chili, but that's just me. It's not really that hard. We're also not going across the Atlantic to some country where there's no butcher shops or anything. The worst we're going to have to do is 4 days between decent grocery stores. Maybe 6 days if we're really pushing it and I have to get out the dried meats or canned corned beef or something. We'll talk about that. We'll do a video on that. There's a lot of actual well-preserved meats for people who don't live off of carbs. Survival food is also fine. This stuff gets expensive, but it's not as expensive as you think when you simplify the cooking and the preparation enough. So, pretty basic. What else do we have? Water. So we don't have running water, and we're not going to have a lot of running water. I will probably finish the plumbing before we leave, and I got to talk about that in the next video. We are going to take this little boat for some cruising just to do it. It's going to be pretty minimal. We don't need a whole lot of sink. Unless you're in a marina with dirty water, you don't really have to worry about washing your dishes so much. You need a little bit of freshwater rinse, but you can pretty much use the seawater to wash stuff. Paper plates are a wonderful boon. Oftentimes you can use them a couple times. You can also eat out of the pan. There's a lot of ways to reduce your needs for running water. I'm still going to try to put in a foot pump instead of the hand flipper pump and run the little sink, but we don't have a built-in water tank. We don't have a through hole for the sink drain. All that got removed by a previous owner who turned this into a very minimalist boat, and I thank him from the bottom of my heart because it makes so much of this easier. So we're probably going to run a 6-gallon tank, maybe 2 or 3 of them, so that you can plug into which one you want, run a foot pump to draw water out of it into the sink, and then we'll have a sump. A sump is basically a gray water bucket, a gray water bin, a gray water container, and that's going to be, again, 5 or 6 gallons, something that you can lift up if you need to, and we're going to run a manual gusher pump. I'm not even going to use an electric pump. I'm just going to use a manual gusher pump, the kind you have for your emergency cockpit drain, your emergency bilge drain in your cockpit, and going to drain it out the back. Gray water is fine to discharge most places, and that's what we're going to do. You know, we're not going to be doing anything with the gray water. We're not going to have a lot of soap or a lot of chemicals or anything. We don't need any of that. So the gray water really is just your toothpaste or your sponge bath or something, you know, or, you know, not even a sponge bath. I mean, if you're going south, until it gets really cold, you're probably just jumping in the ocean and then doing a freshwater rinse. And you can do that with a solar shower or a garden sprayer. Right in the cockpit, and it drains out the cockpit. So, you know, the water needs are much more minimal than people think they are. If you want to take a warm shower in your boat, and your boat is very minimal, you still don't want a pressurized water system. You just want a way to heat the water and have it flow. I would use a garden sprayer, one of the pump-up sprayers that you use for like pesticides and stuff. Obviously, don't use a used one with pesticides in it because you don't want to take a shower in pesticides. So you take a 3-gallon or a 4-gallon sprayer, you put warm water in it off of your stove or your barbecue or whatever. Not super hot, just warm. You pump it up and you spray. I've done this in van life. I've done this living in a yurt on a mountain. I've done this living in a tent in a valley. I've done this on a farm where I needed to rinse off before I went inside to take a shower because I was too dirty to go inside the house. It's all fine. No worries. All of these things are solvable, and it seems a little weird if you're a householder, but it's not. It all works just fine. And when you want a really good hot shower, you know, you pull up to the dinghy dock and you go find a place and you pay $7 or $10 and you go take a really good hot shower. No problem. The more I get into the water system, because that's like the last missing piece, not the last expensive piece, the last missing piece, you know, the more I'm willing to just run with it. I would even be willing to gravity feed a 3-gallon day tank above the sink to do the minimal stuff I need to do to clean my titanium spork and brush my teeth. We'll see how that goes. The expensive part is going to be the electrical, and we have to do that up right. It's kind of the one key that makes everything else so much simpler, and we're going to talk about that in the next video. Right now, I'm off to do boat work, so stay sideways.